At Barkas's entirely indifferent answer, Talia's eyes narrowed into highly suspicious slits. Either he was simply far too exhausted from the journey to bother arguing with her, so he was brushing off her venomous words, or he genuinely did not care about his physical appearance at all. Staring intently into his impassive, severely handsome face exactly as if she were desperately trying to take it apart piece by piece, Talia let out a deeply frustrated sigh. "Sometimes, when I am in the same room as you," Talia muttered bitterly, "I genuinely feel exactly like I am going to explode." Even to this sudden, highly emotional attack, Barkas did not react in the slightest. The silence dragged on heavily, and Talia began to get intensely angry, her anxiety violently spiking. She aggressively pulled the thick duvet all the way up to her chin and turned her back to him, facing the wall. "We are done talking. Leave my room." "I will leave," Barkas said calmly, "exactly as soon as I see that you have taken your fever medicine." "I am absolutely not going to drink it," Talia snapped to the wall. "So get out. I will leave only after you drink it and I am physically certain you are feeling better." "I told you I am not going to drink it." Talia turned around sharply, her eyes flashing with intense irritation. But the absolute second she moved, her gaze was instantly riveted by his icy blue eyes, in which the golden light of the bedside lamp shimmered unsteadily. Barkas slowly, methodically pulled a heavy oak chair directly up to the edge of the mattress and sat down. "If you absolutely insist on continuing to be this stubborn," Barkas rumbled, his voice dropping an octave, "I will simply have to forcefully make you drink it." Talia stared at him in absolute, paralyzed confusion. Suddenly, the vivid, terrifying memory of their first wedding night violently surfaced in her mind, blurry, highly chaotic, and heavily distorted by narcotics. She remembered exactly how he had forced her to swallow the potion. And him? Talia thought frantically, her heart hammering against her ribs. Does he also remember what he did to me that night? A thin layer of nervous perspiration immediately appeared above her upper lip. Feeling an incredibly strange, sexually charged tension violently hanging in the silent room, Talia desperately, awkwardly tried to change the subject. "You haven't been drinking tonight, by any chance?" "A little," Barkas answered indifferently, leaning his broad shoulders back against the chair. "I simply had to play along with the Eastern nobility at the welcoming reception." Talia stared at him with intense suspicion and said sarcastically, her voice much harsher than usual to cover her panic. "Well, if you are drunk, then go wash your face and go to sleep. Why exactly did you come stumbling into my private bedroom just to start a brawl?" "I am absolutely not drunk," Barkas replied casually. Looking exactly as if something was slightly bothering his wrist, he unclasped a heavy silver bracer from his forearm and placed it softly on the nightstand. Talia looked at him closely and asked carefully, "So, did anyone at the reception fight with you because I refused to show up? Who exactly would dare to say a single word about you?" Barkas asked, his thick eyebrows knitting together in genuine confusion. "You are the Grand Duchess. You are the highest-ranking woman in this entire dukedom. There is absolutely no one in this castle to whom you ever have to justify yourself. Who is making excuses here?" Talia muttered, looking sideways at him. But her heart fluttered strangely. It was incredibly jarring for her to hear this level of absolute, unquestioning respect from a man who had never once treated her like a real imperial princess back in the capital. She was just about to sarcastically retort, "You should take a look at yourself," when a sharp knock echoed on the bedroom door. "Commander," a timid voice called out. "I have brought the medicine from the castle healer. Come in." The heavy oak door opened, and a petite Eastern maid entered the room carrying a silver tray. Barkas immediately stood up, took the small glass bottle directly from her hands, and dismissed the terrified girl with a sharp nod. Talia stared at the tiny blue vial in his massive palm with a rigidly tense expression. For some terrifying reason, every single organ inside her chest violently shrank. She swallowed hard. Her throat was incredibly sore. Barkas sat back down in the chair, leaned his massive frame very close to the bed, and slightly shook the glass bottle directly in front of her eyes. Drink. Talia slowly, fearfully looked away from the tiny blue vial and directly into his face. Asterisk if I absolutely refuse to drink it. Is he actually going to kiss me exactly like he did that night? Asterisk the sudden, terrifying thought sank violently into her heart, making her pulse race out of control. Not knowing exactly what to do, she aggressively lowered her eyes to the blankets. Barkas slowly leaned even closer. His chest was practically touching the mattress. Are you refusing? He asked quietly, his voice a lethal, vibrating purr. Talia's face instantly burned exactly as if it had been set on fire. If she continued to be stubborn right now, he was absolutely going to read every single terrified, highly inappropriate thought that was currently racing through her head. Talia practically snatched the bottle directly from his fingers with a violently trembling hand. Fine, whatever, I will drink it. Talia muttered angrily. Deliberately glaring him directly in the face to prove she wasn't intimidated, she violently tore the cork off the bottle and threw the liquid back. The incredibly bitter, highly concentrated infusion of strong Eastern herbs violently burned her mouth and slowly crawled down her throat, feeling exactly as if it were chemically burning her from the inside out. Talia squeezed her eyes shut, desperately fighting back tears, and broke into a violent coughing fit. Of all the horrible, narcotic drugs she had ever been forced to swallow in her life, this was by far the absolute worst tasting. What kind of foul rubbish is this? Talia gasped, wiping her mouth. It is a highly concentrated fever potion prepared by the chief doctor of the Siorcan family, Barkas answered calmly. He poured a glass of sweet apple cider from the silver pitcher on the nightstand and handed it to her. From today on, your physical health will be strictly monitored by the local Eastern healer. Talia, who had hastily grabbed the glass of cider in order to desperately wash away the terrible taste, froze and stared at him incredulously. Why on earth would you do that? Talia demanded. I already have a personal healer. The Imperial Archmage from the Talon House. Until now, Barkas cut her off, his voice instantly turning incredibly harsh and utterly devoid of sympathy. All that useless Imperial bastard has done is forcibly put you to sleep with narcotic incense and read primitive, highly temporary healing spells over your crushed bones. Barkas glared at her. You will absolutely never recover your physical strength with that deeply negligent approach. The Eastern doctors specialize in physical rehabilitation. They are taking over. Sparks of violent, paranoid anger flashed in Talia's blue eyes. Her Imperial healing magician had been personally chosen and directly assigned to her by Empress Synovir herself. The man was an Imperial master of the highest level. And this barbaric warlord from the Can tribe, whose people only knew primitive herbal rituals, dared to violently place his own local doctors above the Imperial magicians of the Talon House? Or is there a much darker intent hidden here? Talia's paranoid mind whispered. Talia narrowed her eyes, glaring at him from under her dark brows, and said sharply. Absolutely not. I will continue to be treated by the Imperial magician from the Talon House. How exactly can I possibly trust the people here in the East? What exactly do you mean by that? Everyone in this castle absolutely hates my guts. Talia shouted, her voice laced with cold, mocking paranoia. Do you think I am completely stupid? The Siorcan clan actively supports the Crown Prince. Your relatives will absolutely never forgive me for taking First Princess Ayla's place. Who knows? Maybe your precious Eastern doctor will actively try to poison me. The temperature in the bedroom instantly plummeted. His severely handsome face suddenly became utterly, terrifyingly serious. Talia Roem Siorcan. His voice, incredibly soft and dangerously insinuating, instantly filled her ears with an intensely unpleasant, paralyzing chill. Talia violently twitched. It wasn't so much the jarring shock of hearing her new, unfamiliar married surname, it was the lethal, icy warning explicitly laced into his tone. Barkas leaned forward, his icy blue eyes completely devoid of warmth, and continued firmly. I am perfectly ready and entirely willing to endure many of your childish imperial whims. But do not ever cross that line again. My people are not assassins. Something intensely proud and violently protective burned in his cold tone. Genuine anger had finally flared in the Lord of the East. Her own fear instantly violently transmuted into explosive rage. She violently threw the heavy glass of cider directly at him with all her might. Smash! I never asked you to endure a single damn thing. Thalia shrieked. The heavy glass shattered against his chest. Sticky, sweet cider violently flooded his black linen shirt, completely soaking the fabric. A heavy, utterly terrifying silence reigned in the master bedroom. Barkas took a massive, deep breath through his nose. His jaw ticked violently. He slowly, methodically rose to his full, towering height. Thalia instantly backed away in absolute terror, violently huddling herself into the farthest corner of the headboard, pulling her knees to her chest. Barkas looked down at her cowering, trembling form with a deeply incomprehensible, heavy expression. He slowly shook his head. Why exactly do you consistently do things to provoke me, if you are just going to be absolutely terrified of the consequences later? Thalia's face violently flushed with burning shame. Barkas calmly brushed the shattered glass and wet stains off his massive chest exactly as if absolutely nothing had happened, and said indifferently. It is entirely useless to throw tantrums, Thalia. This time, absolutely none of your violent whims will help you. Tomorrow morning, your new Eastern healer will formally begin your physical rehabilitation observation. That is final. I said absolutely no. Barkas didn't even bother to turn around, calmly heading directly toward the heavy oak doors. You are a liar. Thalia shrieked desperately at his broad back. You said yourself just 2 minutes ago that I am the highest-ranking, most important person in this castle. Then why exactly is absolutely everything done your way? Barkas stopped completely dead at the threshold. He slowly turned around and looked at her. Exactly as if he were patiently persuading a highly obstinate, deeply illogical child, he spoke softly. You have the absolute authority to ignore the rest of the world, Thalia. But you should absolutely listen to your husband. Then, entirely deliberately, Barkas slowly reached up and took off the wide, open-fronted Eastern desert cloak that she had previously complained about. He casually threw the heavy garment over his massive arm, looked her dead in the eyes, and added with a slight, incredibly dark, almost imperceptible grin. After all, I am listening to you. Thalia opened her mouth in absolute, paralyzed shock. He took the cloak off specifically because I ordered him not to wear it. Barkas reached for the heavy brass doorknob and calmly added one final order. Rest. To properly recover from the road, you desperately need to get a good night's sleep. Thalia violently snapped out of her shock, grabbed a heavy goose-down pillow, and hurled it directly at his head with a furious scream. But by that exact second, Barkas had already smoothly slipped out the door. The heavy oak door clicked shut, and the heavy pillow violently slammed into the wood, falling to the floor with a pathetic thud. Thalia stared at the closed door longingly, her chest heaving with exertion, and then collapsed heavily back onto the massive bed. Why exactly did it happen that in this forced marriage, I am the one who is constantly suffering, and not him? The deeply unfair thought was incredibly bitter and intensely offensive. The next morning, entirely contrary to her own bitter expectations, Thalia woke up feeling surprisingly, incredibly cheerful. The long, uninterrupted, narcotic-free sleep had actually been incredibly beneficial for her ravaged body. Even her crushed legs ached significantly less than usual. Rubbing her swollen eyes, Thalia sat up in the massive bed. Looking out the window at the brilliant, clear blue sky over the eastern plains, she reached over and rang the bedside bell. Soon, 2 Eastern women entered the bedroom. One was a stern-looking, highly disciplined elderly lady, and the other was a young, incredibly nervous maid with a highly confused look. "Greetings, Your Grace." The older woman offered a perfect, deeply respectful bow. "Please forgive us for not formally introducing ourselves earlier," the eldest spoke first. "I am Aretha, the head maid of Redgo Castle. And this is Brisa." Aretha sharply pulled the younger girl forward by the hand. "From now on, she will serve as your personal, dedicated assistant." The young girl hastily lowered her head and offered a deeply awkward, highly nervous bow.